on
Okay.
Google Meet. And Mac doesn't like Google Meet because it's not Mac.
No, it's really not. Okay, so thank you. Um, I'm grateful to interview this to you today, and I have 8 questions. I'm hoping that will be around 30 minutes. It just depends on what you answer, and I'm sure I'm gonna have some follow-up questions to what you say. And just so that we get started, if you would just say your name for me before we start. So I am Kathy McCoy.
And I am Kimberly Robinson Alexander.
Yes, I'm so happy to be interviewing you because I've been interviewed by you. So it feels cool to be on this side. And so again,
And it's
this is
weird to be on this side.
isn't it? I'm glad not to be on your side this time. But this again is for a school project. Um, this I'm doing this particular interview for my class, Reframing Failure. And so I'm going to be talking, questions are going to be about that topic, like, setbacks and difficulties that you've had on your life's journey. And it's in particular as a leader. And so I'm looking at it from a perspective of mother. I see mom as leader. I see grandma as leader. I see an executive director as a leader, a business owner as a leader. So, in all those experiences, feel free to use those. You don't have to tie them to a job or a place of business that you've worked. Um, and maybe tell me really quick. One of the reasons I wanted to interview you, you're definitely awesome and amazing, of course, but it was because at the time you were leading Mothers of Black Boys United, which is an organization, that is near and dear to my heart and that I have uh, poured into and given time to for many years now. And so I know now that you've transitioned out of there. And so I'm hoping some of that will maybe show up in this interview as well. So let's go to the first question. What are your leadership values and how do they differ from your own?
Um, so I don't think my leadership values differ from my own, honestly. I think actually that's one of the struggles for me as a leader. I believe in fairness, opportunity, holistic learning, holistic opportunity,
Mm,
um, and holistic grace, if I could put those two words together. And I think that in a world that is geared toward capitalism, in a world that lives in nepotism, and a world that sees a lack of accountability and a large amount of what's the word I'm looking for? A large amount of this idea that something belongs to you that you haven't
mm,
earned.
mm,
The word I'm losing the word, but that is difficult for someone like me who has a high level of accountability, who takes my charge in any realm, personally and professionally, seriously. Um, it does cause this dichotomy and almost a level of uncomfortability when that's not the way the workplace or the home place works.
mhm, mhm, mhm. Oh, I loved like I was writing this stuff down because you said holistic opportunity and holistic grace.
Mm.
Like, what does that like look like in practice in the workplace? Like that feels it felt it my when you said it, like I exhaled. Like it felt like I was like, I want to work there. Like wherever that is. Like how does that what is the practices that what is the like that holistic opportunity and grace look like in practice?
In practice, it looks like everybody gets a fair shot. It looks like
Mm.
it may not look the same. You know, it might be an employee who has children and they're sick and they have no days off, or an employee who booked a flight to go someplace, but we're all hands on deck for some reason, right? And I give them grace to go on their trip, and I give the employee grace to be out of work without repercussions. It doesn't look the same individually, but it feels the same in
Mm.
opportunity. And so
Ooh.
my style of leadership is to hear, you know, not just listen, but to hear.
Ah.
You know, my journey is vast and is long, and it's full of people who saw me past the shell, the hurt, the trauma, you know, the inability to express, the lack of healing, the anger, all of those things. And that didn't show up in every place, but it showed up in enough places that I sit here now. And so I take all of those experiences and all of that grace and understanding that as fallible people, as individuals who bring their whole selves to a job, whether they express it verbally or not, your body expresses what you're feeling. You know,
Mm.
your
Yep.
body, you know, like we say, the body doesn't forget, right? The body doesn't forget,
Yes.
and it doesn't forget it in the workplace. It doesn't forget it in your
Mm-mm.
personal life. And so even the things that remain unsaid, we hear them. And if you
Yeah.
hear them, then as a leader, is it not our duty to at least consider them? You're not always able to do something about it, but is it not my
Hmm.
duty as a leader to consider the place and space that our people are in, because you can't do if you can't do you.
Ooh, ooh, ooh. You can't do if you can't do you. I love that. I love that. What I really like. Ooh, my nervous system wants to work for you because like it feels like my one of my values is, and it comes from Alondria Williams. They were a disability justice advocate that I learned about during COVID, who saved my whole life. Like their work just allowed me the space to not produce because we're going into COVID, and I'm had I didn't realize how much I had my value tied to what I produced.
Yeah.
And when I could not produce and like could not, this work really just was a warm hug. And one of their poems is "We Are Worthy," and in that poem, it's like we are worthy, not because we are worthy, just because,
Just because.
not because what we produce, but because of who we are. And I remember reading that, and it just like was like, yes, yes. And it was like a freedom moment, one of those liberation,
Mhm.
those acts of liberation. You're just like, I'm free from that belief. And like that's what you're saying feels like in practice, is this idea that you're seeing the people who work for you or at work as whole people. Like they have lives, they have things, they have a past, they have things they're working through now, other than what's going on at the workplace, and to be able to give them opportunity and grace holistically, to be able, just like you said, I'm gonna let them not miss the flight, like even though, or go to the trip, even though it's not work related, like still seeing that as an offering that as a leader you can give. Like that feels like a world, like a new world to me. We're talking about leaders, and I kind of define, a little bit about what I think a leader is. Maybe tell me what you define what a leader is, and then answer a question that I know that you've transitioned from mob, but do you
Mhm.
still consider yourself a leader?
Absolutely. I
Mm-hmm.
think that leadership is sans a title.
Mm.
Um, yeah, leadership is doing the right thing.
Oh, ooh,
Leadership
I
is
love it.
doing what you feel your truth is the right thing in every and any situation, even when
Mm-hmm.
that's hard. You know, I think
Mm-hmm.
that leaders have to have professional and personal courage. Leaders have to be
Mm.
courageous even when it's difficult. And that goes for mothers, that goes for
Mhm.
professional leaders, that goes for friends. You know, sometimes you got to have hard conversations with friends. Um, I think that leadership is really about standing up and being true to who you are, whatever that is. And so that has nothing to do with a title to me. Um, Transitioning from Mob United, that was an 8.5 year journey in terms of having one leadership position or another within the organization. Um, and what I led lives. That's not
Mm.
um
I
and
love that.
yeah, what I led and what I brought to that organization lives. What I bring to be empowered will transcend all of the experiences that I have had in every leadership role. You know, as a
Hmm.
director of nursing, as the executive director for Mob United, as a nurse leader, as a parent, as a grandparent, um, as a peer educator, as all of the things that I have done and experienced in my life. Um, that's what leadership is, right? And it's a responsibility,
Hmm. Ooh, yeah. Yep, yep, it is.
responsibility to take all of your experiences, good, bad, indifferent, the hurtful ones, and to do something with it. You
Hmm.
know, that to me is what a leader is.
Mm.
I don't covet. I don't covet my
Yeah.
pain. I don't covet my
Mm.
successes. I don't covet my losses. I don't covet what some might deem as failures. I don't covet those things. And
Yeah.
I don't because somebody needs to learn from them.
Mm. That that right there. Ooh, 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 mm. That just like sent chills up my spine. And I'm looking at the where I was gonna go with the question. It's like you went right there, like right with that. Because that idea of um they have to learn, like that ability, like there's a one of the things that I was saying recently was like about feedback, was like give me feedback, because if you don't, I become a statue and I
Mhm.
just become stuck in the way that your perception or the way I am. And if you are in my life, someone that cares for me, you give me feedback. Don't let me get stuck in one position here. Like, I want to be fluid, flexible like water. That's what
Mhm.
I like to be. And so that's what that felt like in that idea of like, if I don't let them learn, then they'll never get it. And that's part of being a leader, like too, like absolutely. And do you follow Mel Robbins, or do you know who there's a
Mhm.
big hoopla about
Mel Robbins.
Robbins. It's she's a like mm, maybe a motivational speaker. I don't know if she's a coach or not, but she she does a podcast, I believe, and has some books.
Hmm.
But I have been seeing her a lot lately, and one of the things that she's been talking about is this concept of letting people be who they are, like, and learning that idea of acceptance, like, and oftentimes we're trying to make things happen, and her things like you just gotta let them, and so that like this year her whole mantra is just let them. So like people want to talk about you, let them. People don't want to show up,
It's
let
none of
them.
your
Like
business.
I
Listen, let
just
me tell you something. What people say about me is none of my business. It is none of
right.
my business.
None. And so it felt like that was in that kind of like same line frame of like just let them learn, let them. I don't have to, like let them. I feel like that's such a beautiful leadership skill. What I wanted to ask when we were talking about that and like allowing people to learn, like what are some challenges that you faced as a leader and how did you overcome them?
Girl, I quit. No,
No, but that's the truth, and so that's the truth.
it is. But I do want to put that into perspective. I don't want to just leave that
Right,
days
exactly.
because I think one thing that I've learned over the last maybe 3 or 4 years is every space is not yours forever. I am
Mm-hmm.
7 years old, and at 47, I grew up in this place and space that you worked the job, you stayed there, longevity was the thing, you got your pension or whatever, your 401k, 403b, and you lived the rest of your life. And over the last 3 or 4 years, I gave myself permission not to be unhappy at a job.
Oh, I love that.
And so that looked like a lot of different things. And I'm gonna tell you, point blank, period. One year I had 5 jobs. And it's what these millennials are out there doing. We talk about them.
Yes,
We talk about
yes.
these
Don't
young
talk about.
people. We talk about these young people, but they have this formula. Many of them
They
do,
do.
where they get to their 6 figures, their 7 figures by learning what they need to learn from wherever they are and moving on. And I
Mm-hmm.
adopted that about 3 years ago. And I had 5 jobs in one year, and it was uncomfortable and it was completely and totally contrary to what I was brought up believing that
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
stayed someplace and you were loyal, but what am I loyal to? We loyal to these things that's not loyal to us, because they'll have your replacement in the lobby while they're firing you in the office. They don't give you no warning on termination, but want a month's notice when you leaving them, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
I had to put all of that into perspective in terms of what that looked like for me and what it was that I needed and wanted for my life. And
Mm-hmm.
so I changed how I moved. And, just to go back to the original question, I wanted to give
Uh-huh.
context to what I
Yes,
was
from
saying
the
when I
yeah,
said
yeah,
I
yeah,
quit.
yeah.
But your original question was difficult. I've been in the nursing field now for about 15 years, and the
Mm-hmm.
most difficult thing for me is to see people treated unfairly.
Mm.
The way that I'm able to give employees grace, I also give my clientele, whoever that is, grace. And the last few years of my life, that clientele has been um the advanced aged. And
Mm-hmm.
living here in Texas and dealing with 80 and 90-year-olds comes with some stuff,
Mm-hmm.
dementia,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
the occasional booty boob rub that you ain't asked for
Right.
by old person, getting cussed out, getting swung
Yep.
on.
Yep.
For me, that's the job that we signed on for. But the
Mm.
other part of that is I don't have to agree with your philosophy. I don't have to come from where you come from. I don't have to look like you, speak like you. I don't have to agree with you. But if you have spent 80, 90 years on this planet, given this world,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is that you gave it,
Mm-hmm.
even in disagreement, you deserve grace and you deserve to be
Wow.
treated with respect.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I've heard nigga, I've heard bitch. I've
Mm-hmm.
heard things that were not okay. And
Mm-hmm.
you redirect it
Mm-hmm.
and you
Yeah.
have conversations you need to have. But do I then take the baby and the bathwater and throw it out?
Mm-hmm.
Because there are things that
Mm.
I have said and done that people are not going to agree with when it comes to me. There are philosophies that others are not going to agree with. This is not a
Mm-hmm.
conversation about wrong or right. This is a conversation about in the workplace specifically, if this is your chosen field or whatever your chosen field is, you have to remember and recognize that people have different viewpoints and different perspectives. And so it
Mm-hmm.
was very difficult for me to watch people be treated unfairly, regardless. And
Mm-hmm.
so, in the twilight of an individual's life,
Right. Yeah.
I want
Ooh.
pride, I want
Mm.
grace, I want hope, I want care. I want that person as we very, very it's a ministry. So as we
Mm-hmm.
usher
Mm-hmm.
that person through the last stages of their life,
Mm-hmm.
as they lose autonomy, as they lose their hope, as they lose
Yeah.
function, as they lose memory, as they lose
Mm-hmm.
friends, family. You live to 90 years old, you bury some people.
Yeah.
So they are going through their set of loss. And if I can be empathetic to you, then I can be sympathetic to them. And I need my employees, the people who I work with, to have that philosophy.
Mm. Yes.
And that's hard to find.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm.
And it
Oh,
got
that right
harder to
there.
find post-COVID.
Yes. I agree. Just from my mother being in she passed and I was in the South and it was in those hospitals that I was my angriest around care.
Mhm.
But you listed some beautiful philosophies, um, and I can see how those can be challenges, because just what you said, everyone's not holding those same philosophies in their heart. They haven't. I noticed that, this is just a side note here, but I noticed during COVID, there was a switch to nursing for money. And it went
Yes.
around like traveling nursing nurses. Like I saw it as a business
Mhm.
model to make money. And I wondered about how care, did care suffer because of that movement? In particular, one of my friend's daughters, her and I were talking about it because she was all about her money and her specialty, but she was saying, she's still keeping her work ethic around her philosophy of care. And so I'm grateful to hear that. And that is a challenge. I think, while you have such like real, like, like I can hold on to those. I can't think of the word my main. I want to say tactile. I guess that's the word I'm gonna use. But like these ideas of like in a hospital of care, we're caring for people as they transition. It feels like those philosophies should be embedded in the culture anyway. And what we know that it really isn't.
Mhm.
How do you then, as a leader, like how were you able to how were you able to create those philosophies as work culture in the orgs that you led? Like, how were you able to infuse those in, and knowing that people don't necessarily come to your job with those? Like, are those you had to teach or model, or how do you do that?
Before I answer that question, I want to go back to your statement about travel nursing. I want to be very clear. Travel nursing existed before COVID. That has always
Mm,
a money maker for individuals beyond working for specific hospitals or specific facilities.
got you.
That it had a big boom during COVID because
Yeah.
there were areas that really needed assistance and
Mm-hmm.
help. I chose not to travel. Um,
Mm,
it's going to be an asset to a community. I wanted it to be my community specifically.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but those industries existed before COVID, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
knock anybody who, wanted to do their
Yeah.
thing. Um,
Yeah.
but definitely we saw an uptick of the dollars and cents of it all.
Mm-hmm.
And that was painful to watch. It was painful
Yeah.
to watch people who were going through. I have children, changing clothes in the backyard and not hugging
Mm-hmm.
kids or not coming home. So I completely and get and understand that part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Back to your question
Mm-hmm.
about how to bring that philosophy in, it really
Mm-hmm.
depends on. Oh, I'm sorry. I got a FaceTime call in the middle of that. It really depends. I have to say, it really depends on who you work for. How
Mm,
easy or difficult it is to have that. And that has a lot to do with who you're employing. It has a lot to do with how much you're paying. It has a lot to do with the culture that exists when you walk through the door.
mhm, mhm.
And sometimes that looks like cleaning house. Sometimes that looks like a great deal of training.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Many times it looked like me coming to work in scrubs, no matter what my position, no matter what my title was,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and giving a bath or feeding a patient or
Mm-hmm.
pushing a med cart. Sometimes it looked like me showing up at the facility at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't hold anyone accountable for something I didn't teach them, no matter
Whoa.
how long they've worked at a facility. I don't know what
I
you do.
love that.
I
That's
don't
a
know,
beautiful. Mm-hmm.
I don't know what you got and didn't get. And that doesn't mean that you have to be retrained on everything. It just means
Right.
I give you grace until I teach
I
you.
was, I was just gonna say that sounds like that grace you were talking about earlier. Mm-hmm.
So, there's a lot of different things. And ultimately, some philosophies of existing entities did not allow for that to happen. And then it didn't
Mm-hmm.
work out. And other places did allow and understood where that was coming from. And it did work out, And so that's the idea that you don't fit everywhere and everywhere doesn't fit in you. You know,
Ooh.
when you are being interviewed, you are interviewing as well. And your 90-day, you know, uh probationary period, is their 90-day probationary period too. It's very
Yeah. Yeah.
important. That goes
Yeah.
both ways.
Mm.
And I think that's in a lot of ways what being empowered is about. It's about taking your power. You have the power for those things. You have the power to say, I've spent my 90 days here. I've really appreciated this.
Mm-hmm.
You another
Mm-hmm.
one, but I do want you to know that this is not a fit for me. You know, we
Ooh,
don't
girl.
like everything doesn't fit in us. Everything doesn't need to
Yeah.
have the permission to transcribe itself onto your DNA. Everything does not need to have access to shifting your cortisol level. Everything doesn't need to have that. And so, especially when you're
Ooh.
talking about the human body, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because as you touch these people who are going through, as you are in their realm, around their people, with their families, losing sleep, getting up, dealing with their bodily fluids and all of those things, when do you get to the point where you decide that their excretions don't need to fall on you?
Uh, you didn't have to break it down like that. You broke that thing down. Like I got that. Like it must like because I
Yeah,
wrote
so,
that.
and that goes for your board of directors and that goes for your
Right.
patients or
You're
your clients or your
you're
your
everything.
supervisor. That goes
Everyone.
across the board,
Everyone.
And a
Like
harder lesson is that that goes for family too.
it it absolutely. And I love that. It feels I love that you brought Be Empowered, your organization. Is it an organization? Your organization into that because that's exactly what I was feeling when you were like I went when you were talking about that the 90 days probation period is yours as well, and I think that shift a lot of folks aren't don't make that shift when they
Mhm.
start a job. They think they're on probation. No, you're both on probation in that way, and I felt very empowering. What I heard there around like this idea of because the question was like how do you shift culture and how do you bring it in. You are very clear, and I love that where there's a point where you have to realize that ain't gonna happen, Captain,
It's not
and
gonna
I gotta
happen.
go.
Mhm.
And I think that is such a leadership, like a beautiful, like a leadership skill. This around when to know when to leave, when that you have done enough. That what you're saying is like, is it worth? Like, that's what I wrote. Everyone doesn't need access to shifting your cortisol, and I'm like, oh my, mic drop. And then you gave that beautiful analogy that just made me see it in all that ways of like, yes. Um and I think that's a beautiful lesson. I think when I'm thinking about, I want us to start, we're about to move into some questions about reframing failure as a leader. And it feels like you really did a beautiful reframe there of this idea that like, because often I'm a very optimistic, not that you're not, but I kind of rose colored glasses is what I'm trying to say. I can come in with, I'm going to shift culture, and I actually tried to do this. I'm going to do it, I'm going to model it, I'm going to be good, it's soft, people love it, they're going to love it. And felt a little rejected because they didn't. You know, and I had to sit in that of, did I fail? Is the my vision for work a failure? Like, did I get rejected? Like that was like, I'm still sitting in that. It's been 6 months since that situation, and I'm still trying to reframe it. And so it feels like what you said to me really felt like a healing balm around, Kathy, they don't deserve one, my cortisol. They don't, that situation doesn't deserve that. And they were on probation. It was 6 months. I left. I said, hey, you don't want to do it? Let's move on. And so, like, how do I, like, that has been the thing that I think my most recent reframe of not a failure. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit. Like, so I'm taking a course, Reframing Failure. And one of the first things that the instructor said to us was, is failure really failure? Like, that was the first thing. Like, and most of us were like, yeah, like, let's talk about it. Like, is failure really failure? And so I want to ask you that, like, how do you see failure, and is it really failure? And then maybe share with us um, a a setback that really set you up for your greatest comeback. You know that saying. Mm-hmm.
I think failure absolutely can be failure if you allow it to be.
Mm, yeah.
I think all failure is opportunity until it's not. And so
Mm,
when you're in a situation where something didn't work out, whatever your vision, your intentions were, that didn't happen, right? Um, if you allow it to sit there, then it is, right? Because
mm,
you can sit in the quicksand and you can slowly sink
mm-hmm.
and never be introspective, never ask yourself how you contributed to that. And not because you did something wrong. Maybe it's what you chose not to see. Maybe it was those rose-colored
Mm-hmm.
glasses. Maybe it's the signs that were like, boom,
Boom, boom, them
and be like,
flags.
I don't see it. It ain't there. We've all been there, right? Like we knew
Yeah, yeah.
that date we went on, that man we married, like
Ooh, ooh, ooh.
whatever,
Why you all in my business? Yes.
whatever. Like we've all been there.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the hardest situations. When the writing was on the wall, the hardest situation is to say, I knew I shouldn't have. I did. And now how do I fix me? Not fix this,
Right.
because this is not to be fixed. How do I
Yep.
fix it? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm.
think that sometimes we're afraid to take the accountability that we need to take for whatever our portion of that was,
Yep.
even if our portion was just acceptance.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think my biggest set of growth for me came when I accepted angry Kim, when I accepted
Mm.
traumatized Kim, when I accepted the imperfections that were me,
Mm.
when I accepted codependent Kim, when I accepted the fact that all of those parts were part of me and that I required growth.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh.
I required grace for myself.
Mm.
And I had to define the things that happened in my life for me. Not by my friend, my best friend, not by my boyfriend, not by my husband, not by my mother, my father, my sisters or brothers. I had to define those things and those hurts for myself and then determine what relationships around me were going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to consistently work at not repeating those. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
I still do. You
Yeah.
fall back into what you know, and trauma feels like home to me because that's what I know.
Mm-hmm. Whoa.
Struggle sometimes feels like home. You know, 15 balls in the air feels like home because my body activates to that. But is that the activation
Mm-hmm.
I want?
Mm-hmm.
And is that the activation I need?
Oh, you teaching here. I'm like, huh.
So I think
Hmm.
failure for me is not necessarily failure as long as I have the ability to acknowledge my contribution to it, where I went wrong, provide myself grace, apologize to who I need to apologize to sincerely, and then make a concerted effort to be different. And if I can do
Mm-hmm.
those things, then that was a teachable moment and not a failure.
Mm.
And then I work at making amends for whoever I hurt.
Yeah,
And sometimes that's amends with myself
absolutely.
because I knew that was a decision I didn't need to make and I did anyway.
Yeah, I
And
love that.
so I didn't fail if I can do that
Nope.
much.
Nope. Nope. I
So
love
that's what
that.
I do.
Okay, so I love that. I'm gonna put a pin in what I want to say because I want to hear what was your greatest setback that we really was a that set you. What was a setback that set you up for your greatest comeback?
I think when I transitioned from nursing full
Mm.
time,
Uh-huh.
um, in June of 2023, I had just come back from Georgia and was really, 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 really unhappy at my job. I was working as a director of nursing for an assisted living facility here in Houston, and I was miserable. I was miserable with the bottom line being the bottom line. And
Mm-hmm.
I was miserable with managed care and the idea that certain things were going to happen and not going to happen. I was miserable knowing people were paying thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars out of their pocket to live in a place that they were not being properly cared for. Um, and it became really hard for me to go to work every single day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And no matter how many times I said, this is not right, as the clinical leader, that wasn't respected, as the only clinical leader in the building, that wasn't respected. And that was really difficult for me. And on this day, I got off the plane literally on a Monday, drove from the airport to work, put on work clothes in the bathroom, walked past my then manager's office, who said something real fly, something that Harlem Kim wouldn't even have been standing for. Okay. Okay. Praise the Lord. Because if this was 20 years ago in Harlem, I'd have jammed
Yes.
his teeth down his throat, right? And
Uh-huh.
so he said something, and Kathy, I walked past him. I got on the elevator. I went upstairs. I unlocked my office, and I wrote my resignation. And I left that job with no, I didn't know,
Wow.
no savings, no real savings, no job, no plan. Didn't know what my next step was going to be, but I knew it wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that that situation was over. And to a large extent, I knew nursing as it stood in the form in which it was being done at that time, post COVID, was over for me.
Mm-hmm.
And in July, I came in as the interim ED for Moms of Black Boys United. In September, I was voted, I stepped down from the board and I was voted as the executive director for Mob United permanently. Um, and even though I've transitioned from that position, I do have to say that Mob United, as the executive director, gave me the courage to see me.
Mm. Oh, I love that.
It unlocked, and not just in the year and a half I was ED, but really over the 8.5 years.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I made lifelong friends, but I made friends who saw me in my present.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
my 40-year-old friends that tell the stories, right?
Right,
My
right,
sisters and
right,
brothers who
right,
tell the stories, not my
right,
mom
right.
that tells the story. But there's something about making friends in your more healed place, right? Because healing is
Yes,
continuous,
yes,
it's a
it's
spectrum,
yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
But there's
Uh-huh.
something about making friends in your more healed place that allow you to see who you've become, even when you
Mm.
don't see who you've
Yeah,
become,
I love
because
that.
your reference point,
Uh-huh.
16-year-old Kim and 17-year-old Kim and angry Kim and traumatized Kim, like all of those things are still part of me. But my journey with Mob United and going into that executive director position truly, truly allowed me to recognize that I'm not an imposter,
Mm.
that I've done a lot of the work, that I
Wow.
continue to do the work, that who I am is enough. And it's okay for me to be flawed. It's okay to
Yes.
sit in my truth. And it's okay for that flawed individual to be powerful and to sit in her power and to tell her story and it be a healing journey rather than the thing that continues to indict you.
Mm.
And so I have learned to stop indicting myself.
Yep. Yep. That's a big less. Oh my God, stop indicting myself.
So
Huh.
I don't know if it's so much of a comeback as it is a coming to my own that has happened over a lot of years and culminated now in this place and space
Mm-hmm. 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 Mm-hmm.
wants
Mm-hmm.
me to empower people in the
Yes.
way that the last 30 years of my life have empowered me.
Yep. Yep. Look at it feels like, like definitely you are so empowering. Like when I sit with you anytime, but in this moment, I've been so empowered. Like if I didn't know that was the name of your org, I would be telling you to, start something called Empowered. But there was something I wanted to go back to when we talked about this failure of failure, and it's going to lead to our last question. And I loved what you said about what I wrote was if you let it, that was the like if you let it, if you didn't find opportunity in it, if you don't take accountability, I wrote acceptance over to the side because you talked a lot about acceptance of all those sides of you have helped you be able to see failure differently because you accept yourself. All the traumatized Kim, the angry Kim. I love that. That is such a beautiful work, and it reminds me of a quote that when my son died. And I was telling Dr. Maxine Mims, bless her soul, she's moved on, but she is the founder of Evergreen Tacoma here at college, and she is an older Black woman, just left a big imprint in so many lives here in the Washington area. And I met her. She's a mentor of one of my friends, and I went to her house um, for her to love on me when my son died. And I was telling her all of the tragedy of the story, and she said to me, she held my hand and she said, "Kathy, that was tragic." She said, but it will become a tragedy if you don't do anything with it.
Mm.
And
That
it was
part. That's it right there.
that,
That's it
that
right
part.
there. That
That
part.
part. And so that is what I heard Dr. Mim say that as you were speaking, it just reminded me of her holding my hand saying, and that's how I started Save Our Sons movement. That's how I did all the work that I do in the world around boys and men and girls. And all the things I do came from Dr. Mim saying, Kathy, don't let this become a
Yeah,
tragedy.
exactly.
It's tragic, absolutely, but it becomes a tragedy if, and it feels like you're saying, like, yeah, it's a failure, but it really becomes a failure, like if you do these things. So when I think about
You
that,
can
and
put anything in
that
front of that. You can put grief
yes,
in that. You can put
right, right,
like you can pathologically do any you can pathologically fail, you can pathologically grieve,
yes,
you can
right,
pathologically lose jobs, you can be
absolutely,
that person who will continue
absolutely.
to do those things over and over and over and over and over again in relationships across the board. You can put anything in front of that.
Hmm.
It's tragic, but it becomes a tragedy if you don't get back up.
If you don't get back up. And so I remember my first presentation, that was I started with that quote. I think it's in my book. I think I started, I don't know, but it sets us up for our last question, which is thinking about the feedback that you've received as a leader.
Mhm.
What feedback changed the way you lead?
That I was mean.
I think I got some of that feedback too before. That you were mean, huh?
I am a New Yorker in the South. I'm in Houston. I was born and raised in Harlem, and most of my experiences and most of my fortitude and the thickness of my skin and environment and growing up in the crack epidemic and all of those things, I think the biggest feedback that I have gotten, and more than once, is that I'm mean. And I tell people I'm kind, but I'm not nice. And I mean that thing.
I
I mean that thing. And it's true. It is
like
very
that.
true. I am kind, but I am not nice. Um,
Uh-huh.
and I think I have learned to finesse not being nice.
Mm.
I have deal breakers. In the nursing industry, deal breakers is you can't treat my people bad. I don't care what they do.
Right, right, right.
You deal with what they
Yep.
do. And sometimes
Uh-huh.
what they do is giving them a 30-day notice and say you got to move out. But you
Yeah.
still can't treat them bad.
Right. Absolutely.
You still can't treat them bad. And so I had to learn to finesse all of the things that are me and still be me,
Mm.
but not get the feedback that I was mean.
Mm.
And sometimes that's
That's,
unavoidable. You terminate somebody, you mean. Like it ain't
oh yeah, you're gonna be
too many
mean.
things you're gonna do about that,
Hmm.
right? Sometimes as a leader, you have to have hard conversations and you have to do the hard things.
Right, right.
Um, But yeah, my
Did
my
it soften you? I know you're saying finessed, which I
Mhm.
know what that means. And and I think I feel like it can be a softening. I mean, do you feel like it changed like it because I know you. I mean, I hear you. I wrote Bronx. Like I coming from I live in Texas. I have never lived in the Bronx, but I know the difference of the two. And I could imagine people thinking that you're mean. It's probably more direct, or
Yeah, it's a
you say
cultural
what you
difference.
feel. It's
Yeah.
just a real cultural difference. And but it feels like what you're saying is like I was open into hearing it and I made some adjustments or changes. I didn't internalize it. Like that's what I love, but I hear here is you did not internalize it as I am mean. You're like, no, I'm kind, not nice, which is not mean. Like, you know, and I get that. I get I believe I'm kind and not nice too. But
And I'm firm
I
and but fair, you know. And
yes.
and and I take pride in both of those things. I take pride in my ability to be kind and not be nice. And for me, that means I'm not a pushover. I'm not going to
Yeah.
let you run over me. And I take pride in the fact that I'm firm, but I'm fair across the board. I think
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that is important as a leader
Hmm.
to be fair.
Yeah. Did it change? Like, I think one of the best feedback that I got as a leader that like shift the way I changed is it happened in when I led in church.
Mm-hmm.
which is you get feedback all the damn time, unsolicited advice and
Mm-hmm.
all kind of other things.
Yeah.
But this one was I was I'm a co-founder of a Christian sorority, and so we had a line that we were pledging, and
Mm-hmm.
I was the teacher, so I was the one that taught the Bible lessons and that sort of thing. And one of the pledgees said to me, the feedback she gave me was like, "All your lessons are so sin based, like they're so shame based, like,"
Mm-hmm.
and I don't relate to that because I didn't grow up and all that trauma, you know, and all that stuff. And I remember at first taking it like, what? You know, like it really hit me a little, but it changed me. Like I changed my whole, like this, and I still have this person in my life. And I tell her all the time, like, you changed me. You changed my leading because one, the church I was in was definitely shame based, and everything I was teaching was from their purview and the way I was taught to teach. And so she really helped me open up my vision to see other people and not judge people based on what they look like or what my story was or what people were telling me. Like I really had to, like I went from like preaching about trauma to like preaching about you are don't, you know, maybe it's anxiety or maybe other things that aren't about the shame of drugs, alcohol, sex, you know, all the things. And
You stopped preaching about the symptoms and started talking about
t-
the
that
disease.
the D
That's
exactly.
that's what it is.
Exactly. She
Because
really
all
shifted
those
me.
things
Yep.
are the symptoms of
Yes. Yes.
everything around you.
Right.
And to that end, I stopped living in the symptoms
Yes.
and started talking about the disease that
Right.
was all of the things that I experienced.
Right.
But the thing that
Right.
transformed me the most had nothing to do with a job. It was parenting.
Whoa. Yeah. Hell yeah.
It was parenting. I am the mother of four children. I had my first child at 16. I had my second child at 20. I had my third child at 22. And I had my last child at 27. So by the time I was 30, I had four children. I had three children with three different last names by the time I was 22. And so much shame associated with that, so much backstory associated with that. But I was a different mother to each one of those children. And to each one of them, I failed in some aspect. To each one of them, my trauma showed up in a way that was hurtful to them.
Mm.
And I've had to apologize to each one of them. And I don't know that they have all accepted that apology. My only hope is that as they mature, as they grow, as they deal, um, that they learn, feel, understand, and mature into what it is that I was saying. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but beyond apologizing to them, I still show up because it's not enough to say, I'm sorry for how I hurt you. But I then have to show up to mitigate the symptoms that I created
Mm-hmm.
because of the trauma that I caused. And that's hard. And that's something that I'm still dealing with today
Mm-hmm.
with my children who are now 31, 26, 24, and 18. And being able to say, I did not handle that situation right. And I was wrong as a mother, as a parent, is really hard to do. But each one of those children who said, I didn't like that, that was wrong, that was harsh, this hurt me, then changed how I dealt with the next one.
Mm.
Um, Now, my lesson at their age and having four mostly adult children, because 18 ain't grown, he ain't cooked.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Uh-huh.
but having
Not
four
yet.
mostly adult children is now, how does Kimberly stop compensating for what she didn't have as a child, as a parent?
Mm-hmm.
Because mitigation and safety netting can also be debilitating.
Yeah.
And so there's a shift in one that I haven't mastered is teaching accountability, but still being present. The
Yeah.
only way I know how to be present is 10 toes down.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I have 0 and I have 100.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Now trying to learn 50.
Yeah.
I'm trying to
Yep.
learn that I don't have to work for 16 hours and I don't
Uh-huh.
provide an out for everything and I don't have to take certain things even from my
Yeah.
children,
Yeah.
who are wonderful
Yeah.
beings. That all four
Exactly.
is wonderful beings.
Uh-huh.
Um, but who I am is reflected in them. Who I want,
Yeah. Right.
more importantly, is reflected in them.
Yes.
And
Oh man.
that shows sometimes. That
It
shows in
does.
personality, it shows in our interactions and our dealings. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes it hurts. Sometimes I cry. When my kids bring up things that were hurtful to them. Was never
Mm-hmm.
my intent, never my intention.
Right.
It doesn't
Right.
change,
Right.
you know, my pain and my trauma created a symptom in them that now has to be healed. That hurt now has to be healed so that we can deal with the symptom that they're displaying.
Right. Right.
And
Right. Right.
sometimes it's
Right.
hard to explain that to yourself, your children, and the people around them, you know?
Absolutely. Especially when it's so real in your life and you're walking it out. And you
Yeah.
know, but it feels like I was looking back at my notes because it feels like one of your when you talked about like those big lessons that you've learned through parenting. And it feels like I come right back to what you said about your work culture is like holistic opportunity and
Mhm.
holistic grace, because it feels like that's what you gave yourself.
Mhm.
And then I want to say you also said what I led lives. You had said that earlier around when you leave places, how, and it feels like that I want to give that to you in your parenting because you talked about like, hey, the things you've instilled and like it will live in them. Absolutely. It is part of that. Dang, Kim, like I really learned a lot about, man, you really reframed some things for me, like in here around um, failure, around like really taking lessons and opportunities. What, like when life presents that junk and that crap to us, like we have opportunity to do and I mean I really like I'm excited about I want you to leave with telling us about Be Empowered because you are so like empowering, and it's been very empowering for me to hear how you have all the things that you know they didn't get to hear everything that you've been through, but some of the things, but they see kind of like I call it the juicy fruit, like is what's left. The juicy fruit, all the juices that are flowing from all of like there's in church there's the scripture that we talk about like your labor is not in vain, and it feels like that here, your labor is not in vain. And what we always want to do is produce juicy fruit, bear witness to all the things that we've been through. And like you like have a beautiful fruit basket with some juicy good fruit. And thank you for all of that you said and led today. And so let's leave with tell us about Be Empowered.
Sure. So Be Empowered, honestly, as I was transitioning from Mob United, I really didn't know. I was very, very clear on what I didn't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
I was very clear on what I didn't want to do. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I was in a fellowship for a Primus Fellowship. Shout out to the Mariah Group. And was talking with some of my cohort and went to sleep and woke up with Be Empowered, just as it's written. Went to sleep, after having the conversation of, I don't know what my next step is. I don't know what I want to do. I know I want to stay in this arena. This feels good. Service feeds my soul. I this is what I want to do. And so I literally woke up with Be Empowered in my brain on December 4th. And on December 4th is when I filed my LLC, is when I filed my 501c3, is when I filed my 501c4. And my slogan is I didn't birth babies to bury them. And initially, when I said that, it was about my babies, my literal babies. Like I will talk
Uh-huh.
in a minute. I will do hell in jail for mine. Like that's
Uh-huh.
I will live in fire for eternity for my children.
Uh-huh.
My grandchildren, I tell them the offspring of my offspring of my offspring, I carried you first. So
Mm-hmm.
my grandchildren, my children, um, but as I continue to cultivate the idea of I didn't birth babies to bury them, it's more than that. I didn't birth ideas to bury them. I didn't.
Right.
So many people die with their creative genius stuck inside,
Yes.
and I don't covet that. I don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the
Mm-mm.
desire. I want to
Uh-huh.
give away. I want to.
Right.
This was my experience, and if there's any portion of this that lives that resonates for you, then I want you to take it. I want you to take it. I
Mm-hmm.
want you to do something with it. And so be empowered is really just that. Taking back our power to navigate systems, to speak our truth, to live in our truth, to really sit back and take all of the things that are you, and take the reins back and take control in the workplace, in your personal life, everywhere you go. And I want to empower people to practice self-care, empower people
Mm.
to say no, empower people to recenter, to ground themselves, empower people to really bring to fruition what their ideas are, and then figure out a way to do them. And so I didn't birth babies to bury them. Like that is it.
I
That
love
is
it. I
it.
love it. Thank you so much. I'm going to